Morning. We are continuing to celebrate the eight Sundays, the 8 weeks of Easter, by continuing to look at what the New Testament says about the death and resurrection of Jesus. And as I've repeated a few times, the New Testament has a lot to say about the central event of the Bible. This coming Sunday is Ascension Sunday. And on Ascension Sunday, the church remembers the ascension of Jesus. He was going back to heaven, back to the Father's presence from where he had come when we look at the incarnation of Jesus, his birth in Bethlehem. So he had come from heaven, he was sent from heaven by the Father, and he's going back in his ascension. The ascension of Jesus points to several very important things, and let me mention a couple of them quickly and then try to get to the third that I think is the really big one for us today. The first thing that's significant about the ascension of Jesus is that he has finished, he has completed his work here on earth. In the death and resurrection of Jesus, he had won a victory. And so his return to the Father is something like a soldier's return from battle. And Jesus had accomplished the mission that the Father had given him to do. He had defeated the evil powers through his cross and his resurrection from the dead. A second thing that would stand out in the ascension of Jesus is that he is installed as King and Lord over all. And so the picture of Jesus in his ascension and after his ascension is one of Jesus being seated on his throne in heaven. And so that too points to his victory. That points to his position as Lord and King over all. But today, what I really want to look at is something in Acts chapter 1. Jesus had been giving special instruction to his disciples just prior to his ascension. And then I want to read these verses 9, 10, and 11 out of chapter 1. Jesus gave the instruction. And then Luke says this, "And when he had said these things, as they were looking on, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while they were gazing into heaven as he went, behold, 2 men stood by them in white robes and said, 'Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come again in the same way as you saw him go into heaven.'" He will return. That's one of the critical things about the ascension of Jesus. His final promise was that he would come again. And at his ascension, the angels, or the 2 men in white, remind the disciples of this. And they say, this same Jesus will indeed come back. He will come again. So when you think about it, without Christ's return to raise those who have died in the faith and receive those who are still alive and in the faith, without that, we would have an incomplete story of Jesus. And so with this promise for over 2,000 years now, since Christ's ascension, we have been a waiting church. In the creed, we say, from there, we mean in heaven, from there he shall come. But there's one more important thing about the ascension and return of Jesus. It comes in the question that the angel directs to the disciples when the angel said, "Now, why do you stand here gazing into the heavens? Jesus will come again." The obvious implication of that question is, don't just be stargazers. Don't just stand around. Didn't Jesus give you something to do? Didn't Jesus give you a task that you need to be carrying out? And so here's what's important about that. The time between Christ's departure into heaven and his return, we are to be busy sharing the gospel, telling the gospel story of Jesus, teaching people what he commanded, And Jesus said that in Matthew 28. So the waiting church, waiting for Jesus to return, is also to be a working church, spreading the gospel story about Jesus in the world. God bless you as you undertake that task.